Hey guys, Chris from Provo Beast Audio Installation, and in today's video we're installing a backup camera in this 2007 Toyota Avalon. Now in this install we're going to show you how to integrate this camera to an existing aftermarket radio. Let's get started. Now here at the bench, the camera we're installing today is this Natica license plate mountable camera. It comes with a license plate bracket adapter, which we've already mounted the camera to. And essentially here this will mount back behind the license plate. The plate goes in front and it uses those two studs to mount it. This camera kit comes with its own harness and an extension video and power harness that'll take that image from the camera and send it all the way to the screen that's displaying the camera. Now in our case, we're doing an aftermarket radio which we've installed in our previous video. We have it out here for reference and we can link that radio install video in the description at your convenience. Now there's two different ways to wire up your aftermarket camera. Method number one generally is the easiest, and you can simply power the camera off of your reverse light, power, and ground wire, which we'll show you where that is in the trunk. Essentially here that power and ground will not only power the camera whenever those lights are on, but it'll also, with this little pigtail off the RCA end, trigger your camera to the reverse image when you're backing up. This generally goes to the backup camera input wire or reverse gear trigger wire of the radio, so it will automatically cycle that image over to reverse when you're backing up. However, option number two is you can actually wire the camera off of accessory, so the camera's on when the radio is on, and that allows you to actually use the camera more than just in reverse. And our radio, for example, this JVC, allows us to peek on that camera at our convenience in addition to just being in reverse. The downside of wiring it that way is usually we'll repurpose the trigger wire to send power back into the harness, because these red wires in our harness are actually in parallel to feed the camera accessory power, but that's using up that really useful trigger wire. And so if you go this method, if you don't use a smart harness, then you'll have to manually add another trigger wire and run a second wire with this to tap into that reverse light. So you have the option to have that backup camera trigger wire in addition to powering your camera. So it's a little bit more effort in option number two, but it gives you more options. Again, option number one is the simplest, and for most of you watching, it's probably the best and easiest way to go. In our install today, we're gonna go option number two. The reason is, with our radio install, we actually installed a smart harness, and that harness is providing a reverse trigger, which eliminates the need for us to run any additional wiring, which frees up this wire for us to power the camera on accessory. So that's our plan here today. We'll still need to ground the camera, but we're not going to power it by any means with this wire here on the power harness. So we'll cap this one off, we're going to ground our camera, and we're going to feed our camera accessory through this end from the radio power side. So without further ado, what we're going to do is grab our camera kit, let's head to the vehicle and start prepping our license plate area to mount the camera itself. So we're here at the car. We've already removed our license plate. It's located in the bumper versus the trunk lid. Now there is a nice open cavity to pull wire through. And fortunately, if you put your hand right here, your license plate light that illuminates, obviously when the headlights are on, has a harness that goes through the body, and you can feel a little grommet. To also feed our wire through, we'll poke a little hole through it, and that's going to be our passage to run the wiring from the camera into the trunk itself. Now we want to get access to that from the inside, so let's go ahead and pull apart the trunk. All right, so we've pulled apart this. We had a couple of clips today. We'll pop them out and put them back in the panel before we reassemble everything. But this is going to give us access we need to grab wire. And here in the trunk, this is the other end of our license plate light and the grommet that we're going to use to pull that wire through. All right, so we passed our wire through. We put a little slit in the grommet when we pulled it out, and that allowed us to actually run the wire. We don't want our wire pinched between the metal and the rubber grommet, so we just did a little slice in there. It's still totally sealed from weather, which is what we wanted. And up underneath here, we gave plenty of length for our camera to pass through there. We can zip tie that wire so it's nice and clean. And at this point in time, we can put the license plate on and continue from inside the trunk. All right, so we started zip tying our wire here. Now, at this point, we grabbed our extension harness and all the extra cable that comes with it. Off that harness has about a 3-foot run of power and ground. But remember, based on our install, we're not going to run a turn-on wire here. We're not powering the camera off the reverse light. So we actually cut this down to about 6 or so inches. And we have a nice factory ground right here. Anything generally in Toyotas, white with the black stripe, is going to be a ground. So we're going to solder into that. We already went ahead and separated it using our wire strippers. And we're going to solder into that. We'll show you what that looks like here in a moment. And then we're going to insulate the red side because, again, we're not doing anything with it back here. Now, there is a reverse gear trigger wire in this harness that comes down. Your reverse lights are in the rear deck lid. So the wiring that goes to that, any one of these 2 red wires, those are power feeds to the reverse light. So in our case, we did a test for you. This red wire, you'd want to use a T-tap, or you can solder into that connection, and that wire specifically is going to allow you to rob that reverse light power, so you can create either a trigger wire or also power your backup camera for your aftermarket radio right there. Now we pulled back this stripping here so we can get a good shot for you. But we're going to insulate this, we're going to relume it, but basically it's in the harness that comes down from the trunk. What we're going to do is hook up our ground, insulate our red. We're going to zip tie our wire, following along the factory wiring through the factory portal there. And then we'll pick up from the inside. Right, so we've soldered this connection here. Again, you probably could use a T-tap too, but we've got some great wire on wire. And now we have some electrical tape that came with our camera. We're going to go ahead and insulate that ground and then relume the harness. And again, we don't want this. This is going to have accessory power on it, which we're not using back here. So we got to insulate this end. So we're going to add a piece of heat shrink to that, just so it doesn't ground out anywhere here in the trunk. So we went ahead and zip tied and cleaned up. Got our ground all completed here. We had extra wiring on the camera side before we connected to the extension harness, so we bundled that there. And zip tied a wire all the way up here, working our way forward, zip tying it, then we pass it right through the passage here in the rear deck wall. Let's go ahead on the inside, show you where that passes through. On the inside here, it's actually easy if you get your hand kind of right up underneath, just pull it back. You can see right where that wire would pass on through. I grab it, we didn't have to do anything with the seat, made it nice and easy. That's where our wire passed through. We're going to run it down along the kick panels, working our way forward. And our goal here is we're going to work our way all the way to the dash cavity. And at this point in time, we're good to go to reassemble the trunk. All right, so we finished pulling our backup camera wire. As you saw, we went up underneath the dash, underneath the kick panels. There's great space to pull your wire up underneath the steering column and then into the dash cavity itself. Now, like I said, we're wiring our camera off of our radio harnesses red wire. We just teed into that when we assemble this harness. Put a little crimp cap on here, and that's going to send power back through our trigger wire to power the camera on accessory. So whenever the radio is on, it's going to power our camera. Now, the reverse gear trigger wire is provided by your smart harness through the CAN bus of the vehicle, and it's this purple-white provided by this Pac module. So that's why we didn't have to run one separately, and that's the benefit of this Pac module. It also retains our JBL, steering wheel volume controls. It does a ton of stuff in addition to just allowing you to install a radio. So this is very fortunate that we have this. If you want to see how we wired this up, check that video one out on how we did the radio install. And to that point, obviously you didn't see us remove the radio or install the radio, because that's in the first video. We covered that in great detail on that specific technique. So if you want to see that video, we'll link it down in the description of this one. So with this done, ready to go, we'll plug this into the reverse camera input of the radio. We got our power connection made. We got to hook up our purple white to the radio's purple white. And at this point in time, we can get the radio back in the dash. Reverse camera input. All right, so with the radio all reassembled here, it's always important as you go and set up your backup camera that the input is turned on. Depending on the radio, oftentimes your input may not be on for the camera. So we're gonna go to our input, we're gonna go to rear camera, and it looks like ours is on. We have our parking guidelines off, and it attenuates when we put it in reverse. That's fine. So at this point in time, we can put it in reverse. Perfect, automatically pulls it over. Out of reverse, great. Now, because we wired the camera on accessory, the camera is still on and we can peek upon it at any time. So if we hit our camera button, we're not in reverse. So as we're going down the road, the convenience here is we can actually pull up the camera whenever we like in case we need to see what's behind us. So we can pull it out of that image and that's it. So if you have any questions on what we did here, go ahead and post a comment below. If you want to see how we did this radio install or any of the parts that we used for that radio install, we'll link that video also in the description for you. Thanks again for watching. Hit the like button if you liked what you saw, and don't forget to subscribe. We post great content on the channel all the time. We'll see you in the next video.